is the Flex Network. This is the Flex Network. Flex on them. Flex on everybody. This right here is the Flex Network. Yeah. Flex on the G. Flex.
All right. We made it. We are here. We are the Flex Network. My name is Michael. I have Matt on the other side of the glass over here. Um, we're ready to get into some NFL, post NFL draft hype. Do we love the picks? Do we hate them? What teams reached? What teams traded up, traded down? Who took someone they weren't supposed to pick or they could have gotten later in rounds. We got a lot of things going. We got our fantasy football. Matt is our fantasy football guru over here, so much more than I am. So we are just pumped to get this thing going. Matt, what's up? Say hello to the people.
Yo, 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 yo. What's going on today? Nothing.
Yeah, a whole lot of nothing. I worked all day in the rain, so I mean that was not very fun, but
You know what's crazy is here where it rains, it was blistering hot today. Not blistering, but it was really, really hot today. Yet over where you are, where it's always hot, you're getting a little bit of rain. That's crazy to me. That's just crazy.
yeah, it was a little bit of flood action in certain parts of the metroplex here. But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump into it. We are we're gonna go ahead with the draft here real quick, Matt. Were there? I'll just start you off with a couple questions. Number one, were there any teams that you felt like reached for their picks that they could have gotten either later in that same round or just multiple rounds later?
Well, I mean, that's an easy question to answer, really. Two teams in the top six reached out of their minds. What is it? Cleveland Farrell
Yeah,
out of
Cleveland
Clemson
Farrell.
for the Raiders there, and then the QB from Duke going 6 overall to the Giants. I forgot that's dude. I don't know how I forgot that dude's name.
His name
Is
is
Jones?
Daniel Jones. Yeah.
Daniel Jones. That's what I thought it was almost, but both extremely high reach picks. Not to say that they're bad players, so don't get me wrong. It's not to say they're bad players, and they definitely could win out. And I think the biggest thing that you want to say about picks like that is that in 3 years, if the picks pan out, you will never remember that they were might have been a little bit of a reach.
Right.
So I would say them 100%. Outside of them, it feels like the NFL was just going with more football decisions instead of where I thought, when you reach for a guy, you think maybe his talent profile is so incredible that you got to draft this guy top 5, you got to draft this guy top 10. Either there was nobody that had an overbearing talent profile just as far as numbers outside of DK Metcalf, right? Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So in previous draft years, you would have seen DK top 3 and or maybe top 4, top 5, somewhere around there. And probably every analyst had him going at least in the first 10 picks. If he wasn't going to go to Oakland, then he was going to go to Buffalo, top 10, whatever. It didn't happen. In fact, he fell all the way to the very last pick of the second round. And so what I think is a little bit incredible just about this year and maybe the future of the NFL is either they're going the way of statistics and or they're finally starting to understand that you don't reach for numbers. You don't reach for just statistics. You reach for guys, or you don't reach for that. Instead, you pick a safer, more complete football player and hopefully make your team well. When you look at first round draft busts, we only call them a bust because they were drafted in the first round or within the first couple picks. Okay. What's kind of unique is, had those players been drafted in the third round or later, not only would they not be considered bust, but they probably wouldn't go into a environment where they have to be thrown on the field early, where they have to compete because they drafted you so high. And so I think maybe if we go and get away from a little bit of that and go by just complete players or who best fits your football team, instead of who ran the fastest time at the combine, I think that's definitely a better way for the NFL to start trending.
Yeah, that's actually really funny because, like, just to kind of go back to like who is reaching a little bit and what positions. At one time the Cleveland Farrell was mocked all the way down into the 20s to the Seahawks, to get an idea of like how much or how far that they reached. And the whole Daniel Jones thing is, I understand the criticism because, maybe people thought that Drew Lock or someone like that would have been a better pick there. But, it's one of those things. It's like, man, if you really feel like you have your quarterback of the future, maybe not. Maybe he's going to come in and ride the bench a little bit, and then he'll play in a year or two or something like that. But if you feel like you've got your guy, you got to take him. But the idea of like, we're mad at the Giants because they picked their guy at number 6 instead of number 17 or something.
Do you have to take him though? Like, if you think you got your quarterback of the future, here's my problem. Okay. You don't have to take him. I think your assessment of it's a little, or maybe your assessment of their assessment. I don't know if that's how you feel.
No. I was just saying that I felt like they were kind of, I agreed that they, with the criticism of, you don't necessarily have to take that guy. That guy, the specific guy that they chose, would have been there in the later rounds, I believe. And so in my mind, I want to get like everyone says, this draft was very defensive lineman heavy. There are a lot of quality defensive ends, defensive tackles, things of that nature. And so that's just the direction that I would have gone, because, when you leave the top 10 or top 15 defensive linemen, there's a significant drop off. And if you have a top, they were number 6. So if you have a top 10 pick, then invest or get what you can get while it's there, because you never know, that guy could end up being a franchise guy that's on the team for his whole career. You just don't know what you're going to get. And so that's why I would have gone a different direction there.
Yeah, I think, thank you for clarifying that, because here's the thing. I think that you run a really terrible organization when, yes, that's your guy, sure, and you're like, okay, well, we don't want to risk losing our guy. Well, if you don't want to risk that, then maybe I would have seen a couple different moves made, but it seemed like they were just reaching. They did not trade up one spot like the fucking Bears did when they wanted to go and get Trubisky. They didn't move up one spot and give away a farm for their guy. It just seemed like they were reaching, because here's the thing. It's like, yeah, he's your guy. But what you really need to do is you need to be better evaluators of the draft, because not only did your guy, or not only was your guy there at 6, but he probably would have been there at 12. And do you not think you could have read that better and went ahead and got yourself a first round pick for next year and still had that guy at 12, And it was just crazy because I think everybody pretty much league wide had Haskins better than him. And so you could have even traded the pick for fucking someone who wanted Haskins to come up, and grab him. And it's crazy to me how you implode your entire team. Okay, you draft Odell, which was not a reach in that draft class. I mean, he ended up getting selected behind Sammy Watkins, behind was it Kelvin Benjamin? No, it was Mike Evans, I think, came out too. Or maybe not. Either way, he did not go top 5, and which was an incredible pick by them. But then they have a star opportunity last year to get Sam Darnold. And would you not think that Sam Darnold and Odell Beckham for the next 15 years on your NFL franchise would have been a little bit better than none of them and Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, I mean, the Odell thing was like was great. How they got him, where they got him. I think you are right about the Mike Evans thing. They came out together in the same draft class, but I the guy being the that pick, is he there at 12? Probably. I look at Dwayne Haskins as being better, but the only thing that I would say is Dwayne Haskins was I think of all the quarterbacks that were drafted, Dwayne Haskins is probably the most NFL ready right now, just because there's so many things about Kyler Murray that you just don't know how he's going to translate to the NFL. And so I like Dwayne Haskins on the Redskins. I think he's a piece that the Redskins have kind of needed over the last 5 to 8 years. They've had some decent teams that could go on some playoff runs, but they just haven't had that consistent quarterback. And the major critique for Alex Smith has always been that he's a game manager. He's not that clutch guy. That not saying that that's my opinion, but I'm just saying that that's what people say about him.
Odell drafted 12th in that round behind Sammy Watkins and Mike Evans. But that draft class was the greatest draft class you've ever seen in your lifetime. Jadeveon Clowney, Sammy Watkins, Khalil Mack, Jake Matthews, Mike Evans, Anthony Barr, Eric Ebron, Taylor Lewan, Odell Beckham, Aaron Donald drafted 13 right after Odell.
Oh my gosh, dude.
And if you think about the Giants, I mean, they don't have Odell right now, and yet Aaron Donald's the best defensive player in the entire league. And isn't that just somebody that he would just enjoy having on the Giants team? Not only that, but get this. Kyle Fuller, Ryan Shazier, Zach Martin, CJ Mosley, Brandon Cooks, Clinton Dix, D Ford, Deion Buchanan, Kelvin Benjamin, not so good, Dominique Easley, Bradley Roby, and then Teddy Bridgewater, last QB pick to that draft. And all that draft class was phenomenal. But and so you can see why Odell.
Yeah, those are all like Pro Bowl players, you know what I'm saying? So like
not only Pro Bowl players, but Jadeveon Clowney is the whole entire Texans team outside of Deshaun. Khalil Mack, same thing. Mike Evans, same thing. I mean, Odell, just highlight draft year for the first round. And that's what they're actually saying that next year is going to be a really, really, really good draft class. Apparently there's just tons of talent coming out at every position, which is great. I was going to get into Dynasty Fantasy Football. I'm just itching to get into Dynasty Fantasy Football talk right now, but go ahead. You got some more draft stuff?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. So my second question is, what pick did you love? Well, like there was a pick that you just absolutely loved.
In the first round or just in general?
Just in general. I mean, it could be the first round. It could be, second, third, fourth, whatever. Just a pick that you really, really liked.
So, as a homer of Seattle, you had to just say that DK Metcalf was the single best pick in the entire NFL draft. I think even outside of football analysts, even fantasy football analysts are talking about how good of a pick that was, how much value he had everybody thought for sure a first round pick, maybe not, but not the very last pick. And if the Seahawks hadn't traded up for him, it's very possible that he might have even had slipped into the third round. So yeah, that pick for me was phenomenal. And then we talked about Greedy Williams, or is it Williams?
Yeah, Greedy Williams. Yeah.
Yeah, Greedy. We talked about Greedy pre-draft, and then he also goes in the second round. I can understand why he is a little bit undersized, but it's not to say he's not going to be a great corner, or it's not to say he couldn't put on just maybe a little bit of size, or but not only did
he will. That's natural with the move to the professional level in any sport. Think about this. If you want to compare it to the NBA, like look at before and after pictures of like Steph Curry when he was leaving Davidson and Steph Curry now. It's like, whoa, that guy put on like 20, 30 pounds of muscle. He looks totally different. And so
he was a baby in college for sure.
Yeah, he looked like a 15-year-old kid. You're like, what's this kid? Why is this high school kid playing for this college? And so all those guys will put on muscle and they'll kind of get used to the overall speed of the game, the force, the how hard people are hitting, those types of things.
Well, and not only that, but every day Greedy Williams has to go against Odell, Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Baker Mayfield. Every day he has to go against that offense, and that's going to make him better too. And you can't tell me that those guys aren't in the weight room too. The wide receivers. You would think that the wide receivers and the cornerbacks would be like the best of friends. You know what I mean? As far as, hanging out, because they make each other better. There's no, offensive linemen make defensive linemen better, but not really. I mean, defensive linemen definitely make offensive linemen better if they're not good already, but I don't know that they're getting any much better playing with the same guys across the line. You know what I mean?
Right.
The cornerback position is the cornerstone of a team. It has been proven analytically that a good cornerback can win you the game. Like, that is the single position that can win you the most games statistically. You can either shut down the whole side of the field, shut down a primary receiver, which could be your offensive primary go-to target, and then that just completely messes up whole entire schemes a good cornerback. So they definitely make each other better, and it's awesome. So those were my two that I would say are like my best picks. I wasn't really excited about anything in the first round other than Josh. I think Josh Allen went to the Jaguars, so he fell a little bit, outside linebacker. He's or he might be an edge rusher. I don't know. These guys sometimes can do both, and you always see him with a different designation on both sides, but he was a great pick. I think Jacksonville had a great draft too. I'm a fan of their draft. They went out and, for some reason that tackle from Florida was falling. I don't think anybody's ever gotten, like, if there was a true story. Who was that? Jawan Taylor, or no, Jawan something, I think his name was. He's a guy that was definitely atop a lot of people's boards on the tackle. I thought for sure it'd be a great pick for us to have him, and for some reason he fell. I was seeing him mocked anywhere in the top 15 picks, and he fell. But man, he couldn't have fallen to a better team. He goes from playing in Florida his whole life to playing for a Florida NFL team. So if you were to bring that guy to Minnesota, or not Minnesota now, I guess they got to, let's say you bring him to us or the Buffalo Bills, he's just, that's a sunny weather kid going to a cold weather town to play football, especially in the trenches. Do you think that means something? Do you think there's something behind that?
Well, it's I think that you instantly kind of bring over some of like your fandom from your college days over to the NFL, and people are like, oh yeah, I remember that name. I remember that guy. Oh man, that guy was unstoppable at Florida, or wherever he went. And so, I think it makes it easier for you as.
No, I'm talking about cold weather to warm weather, or warm weather to cold weather. If you're a warm weather college player and you go to the coldest fucking NFL team, do you think that that has something to do with either their ability or their potential ability?
I think it depends on like your where you go specifically. Like Minnesota's cold, but they play in a dome, right? So you're not really going to have to deal with it a whole lot there. But if you are going to Green Bay and you have to play outside Lambeau, that's a big deal, dude. If you're playing in January, you're playing in December, you're like, "Oh man, it's freezing cold." Like you remember that Seahawks game years ago? The Seahawks had went to Minnesota and played in that. I think it was a wild card round or something like that. That game was freezing cold. I remember watching on TV just saying, "Man, I'm glad I'm not there because that game is cold." But I think it when you get into the mindset of like, "Oh, I'm only thinking about how cold it is," as opposed to like thinking about how I can beat my opponent, it's a little bit different. And so um it depends how cold it is, but if you're just going, let's say you're going from like 80 degrees to like 50 degrees, I don't think it matters that much. But if you're going from like 80 or 90 and you're going to Lambeau in December and it's like less than 10 degrees, that matters big time.
Dude, it's not even Lambeau in December. Lambeau from October through the rest of the season is going to be colder than the games you've ever played and or practiced in your entire life. You can't tell me that don't make a difference for somebody.
Yeah, I mean it does, but you know, you also don't know where kids came from, right? So like a kid could have grew up in like
well, that's what I'm saying. I think that kid was a Florida prospect through and through. But either way, I mean, I think he to sum that up, he definitely fell. He fell to a Florida NFL team, and so top end tackle fell for some reason, ended up going to a Florida team, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars got somebody who fell out of the top, who was projected to go top 3, and they ended up getting him at what, like 7 or something like that, or 6, 7 or 8, somewhere around there. But that's great. So they had double the value on the guy because they drafted him, double where he was supposed to go. So I thought that was great too.
Yeah, one of the picks that I really liked, and it's a little bit homer of me, but I like my college of choice is Washington State University. So like seeing Gardner Minshew go from basically I think he was at East Carolina, and he said, "Oh, I'm just gonna go be like the 5th quarterback on Alabama's roster, and then be a coaching intern, and then move up and try and be a coach after college and stuff like that." And then you go from there to Mike Leach recruiting you to, winning a bowl game, winning 10 games at WSU. And then, he was actually invited to the Heisman ceremony. He wasn't going to win it, obviously, but he was invited to the ceremony as a standout player. So that was a big deal. But to see him get drafted to like what looks like a perfect fit, the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's such like that culture that they have built there is just perfect for his personality and the things that he does and stuff like that. So what will he be in the NFL? I have no idea, but I will be rooting for him to start on day 1. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it's cool. So
well, a lot of people are actually it's weird because I didn't even know the dude, to be honest with you. I'm not into college football very much as far as like outside of analytics. So it's not like I'm a homer of any specific team. And so because of that, it's not like I know these guys by more than just their stats. Gardner is one of those guys who've been talked a lot about right now because Mike Leach, coach for Washington State University, has came out very publicly quite a few times in his tenure, speaking his approval of a lot of things. Most recently, he's talked about how the NFL scouting process is completely flawed and is in no way a true measurable, like basically saying all the NFL guys, they don't look at what they need to look at in choosing the correct talent. And I do believe he's referring to Gardner going in the 4th or 5th round.
Right.
he basically believes that Gardner is one of the best quarterbacks in the draft class, which he might not be wrong. I mean, I started off this podcast talking about how the NFL must be changing. They must be listening to a different tune because a lot of these highlight players fell down the draft board. And it's not necessarily to say that, oh, they're doing something different. Maybe they're not. Maybe there was just way more alternative talent where it wasn't highlight, and maybe that's where most teams just had needs for positions. They just don't need a DK Metcalf, and so I'm not, maybe they just changed their value system. I don't know, but it seems to be awfully weird that a lot of people are talking about how the NFL did things right this year, how more NFL owners must be reading into fantasy football analytics and production rates and Spark X scores and stuff like that in this draft, and then having Mike Leach come out and say, hey, the NFL scouting is garbage and things need to change, and then the people I listen to in fantasy football talk about how if you were to throw Mike Leach as a GM of some NFL organization, that they believe he can take that organization to the moon because of how he's been able to scout talent and get them through. And I don't know, how good that is or not, but apparently he's been able to produce a lot of good players, especially since he's been there. So we'll see about Gardner, but I like to pick. He looks like a dude that drinks a lot of beers in his college for his college frat. And and he's going to a team that, I mean, they signed Nick Foles, but it's not to say that if Gardner wasn't playing even at the level he was, that they wouldn't start him. And so it might happen, dude. Who knows? That's a team that started Blake Bortles for the last 5 years.
Right. And another guy from WSU that he went undrafted, but James Williams, he was a running back from Washington State, and he went, which was very intriguing because he's kind of been known as like a much more speedier guy, quick in space, very shifty, and he didn't get drafted, but he got signed by the Kansas City Chiefs as an undrafted free agent, but they signed him to a 3-year contract, which is I'm not sure if that's like uncommon, but for an undrafted guy to get a 3-year contract, that's kind of a big deal. And so I don't know if they're planning on getting him mixed in, but I mean, with that offense, with Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes and all that stuff, and with kind of the culture and the way that Kareem Hunt and Tyreek Hill and the direction that those guys are have headed, it's just interesting because it's like, man, here's another speedy back that could come in and pretty much do the same things that Kareem Hunt was doing. So we'll see what happens there. But it's
Who was the guy you just said again?
James Williams. He was a running back for Washington State. So pretty good, much more of like a pass catcher and very shifty and stuff. Not like a between the tackles runner or anything like that, but he was very effective in his time at WSU. His criticism on why he didn't get taken higher was because Washington State didn't run the ball that much. And so I'm like, it's just unfortunate the players getting dinged for that. It's not his fault that they didn't give him handoffs. It was much more of the fact that Washington State runs an air raid, so they have no desire to run. And so
Jason says that if we don't talk about Paige Van Zandt, he's out. he's not listening anymore. Listen, Paige Van Zandt, she is not the first UFC girl to go to the swimsuit edition. So just real quick, wanted to point that out. But yes, for all of our listeners, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition is coming soon, and it's gonna be good. You'll have to tune in. What else on the NFL draft do you got?
Well, I don't have anything else there, but all I would say is I felt like, I don't know what your overall vibe for the draft was, but there's been years where I've been pumped about it, and then years where I have been like, not interested because you pretty much had an idea who was going to go in the top 10. It was just obvious, and And this year, as liking the team that I like, knowing that we only had 4 picks, but were to make a trade and had 2 first rounders, I knew some things were going down. So I was very intrigued by it. And I was actually very pleased that we were able to turn our original 4 draft picks into 11 draft picks after it was all said and done. So what was your overall feeling of the draft?
I thought it was great. It was the first draft that I don't know if it's I don't know if it's because I'm starting to get into too many dynasty fantasy football leagues or whatnot, but I feel like I had a lot of interest in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round just for understanding who might be able to give my fantasy teams like a crazy long-term value. And so because of that, I kind of pay attention to where people will go and be able to analyze things a little bit deeper. So I thought it was a very great. It was the first draft that I watched it since 2014, where I think the talent pool on defense was just great. I mean, the first 3 rounds I think were all successful picks for every team. If you go and watch anything that NFL is putting out, like NFL Network or ESPN is putting out about draft grades, you'll find that predominantly people are getting like A's. It's like a lot of teams are getting A draft grades. I just think if everything continues how it did this year, it's gonna blow up incredibly, already more than it has. Like, it's just either fantasy football is gonna start just going absolutely bananas, even though it already does and is going bananas, but over like what they said, over like maybe potentially 300,000 people on the ground in Nashville for the draft just to be there and walk around. I mean, it's bigger and better than the NFL has ever been this year. And it is incredible because I'm just such a huge NFL fan myself. And dude, it is like my favorite thing in the fucking winter. Sorry about the F-bomb. I'm trying to curb it. It's my favorite thing to do in like late November when they have that game on in London and I have to wake up at 6 a.m. to watch it. Like, it's so fun to be like, I got to go to bed early tonight because I got to wake up at 6 a.m. tomorrow so I can watch this game. And it's just fun. It just goes to show you, if you're like a real sports fan, like the type of fan that, you always watch the games, like sports is always on TV, or you're like me where you went to bed to Sports Center for like the majority of your life and you just really enjoy sports. Like, right now is a great time to be a sports fan in general, and the draft is their focus on the draft is more now than it ever has been, and it's just making everything top to bottom, either your fandom or your ability to start focusing on guys you like and like you fall in love with. There's so much good content out there that ESPN is doing and the NFL that really makes you fall in love with people. They get great videos, like the crying videos of when guys get drafted. Like, those are fun to see. And if that's your team, like, that's amazing, and that's just so, it's awesome. And I just don't think that I can't say that I see it. I love football, right? I love all guys, all teams. I mean, obviously I'm a Seahawks fan because I've lived here my whole life, but like, I like other players, other teams. What's going on with the Browns right now is like unbelievable. Like, you cannot like see something greater for that city and town right now than that. And on top of all that, I still feel like the Seahawks are the marquee team in the NFL for football news, for a coach that you love, for having players that just you rally behind the players and the team, and it's just like there's a dynamic that has been going on in Seattle ever since that probably have the most incredible fan base. Yeah, a lot of them might be bandwagon fans. Who cares? We're all in it together. I just went on a rant and I just didn't want to do it, but I had to because it's phenomenal to see what's going on right now in NFL football. And if you're a freaking true fan of football, next year is going to be an amazing year. Everybody seemed to upgrade their team this year in the draft. Everybody set themselves on a different path. Like, look at Pat Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt, gone. Replaced with Damian Williams, replaced with Mecole Hardman. And boom. Just to watch, is that going to work? They fucking gave away Dee Ford, who had like just as many sacks as Frank Clark, and then signed Frank Clark for a $109 million deal. If you're a fan of the Chiefs, you got to be either stoked or like, what's going on? But either way, like for an outsider of not living there, that team is fun to watch. Like you want to see if that team does well. And it's fun. This is going to lead really well into the fantasy football segment, but I'm going to let you take it over for a second while I go grab another brewhoski. But I really am sorry to leave you after my rant. I apologize.
You're good. Yeah, fantasy football changes everything. We've talked about this in the past. You can now get some enjoyment out of watching okay, we got a problem over here. Anyway, fantasy football changes a lot of things. You can get some enjoyment out of watching a Bills and Jets game. You might have a receiver, or you might have, Josh Allen who plays quarterback for the Bills, and you might need some rushing yards from your quarterback, or just really hoping he can do something. So fantasy football changes a lot of things. It keeps people engaged on the product, and it makes you care about players and markets and teams that you wouldn't necessarily care about without fantasy football being a thing. And some of the places that I feel like people get into trouble is, they might get into trouble in their office leagues and stuff like that, or maybe they put too much money into their fantasy football in these big gambling companies. I know certain states will allow you to gamble on fantasy sports, and certain states won't. I'm in Texas, and Texas does allow you to gamble, and Matt is in Washington, so pretty sure they don't allow them to gamble there. But like I said, it keeps the product constantly in the in the mind of an average football fan. It takes an average football fan and can make them an addict in a certain way for the NFL. So it's super, super interesting. And and as we get ready to hop into this dynasty talk, this fantasy football dynasty league, I'm not necessarily the expert on it, but Matt is, and Matt's going to jump in here in a minute and tell you all about it. But like Matt said, Seattle has done a great job with their acquisition of players, constantly being in the news, and and Seattle continues to be in the news with some of their players and stuff like that, and who they're signing, and the draft picks that they make, and just the overall hype. But like was just reading a little bit ago that it looks like Seattle and New England and potentially Buffalo are the front runners to land Ziggy Ansah, who is a defensive end who played for Detroit past few seasons. And Matt, if you remember, I said in our last cast that they were waiting until today to sign any more players from free agency, because today is the day that they could sign players without losing any of their compensatory draft picks.
Right, and you were correct. I'm back. Can you describe how I left the pot? I tried to get up to get another beer, but you don't understand. Like my studio is not very big. It's about enough space that motherfucking I can get in here. I'd have a second guest in here. I'll figure this out, but that's about it. So right now I'm sitting in a chair right here, is basically butt up right against the back here. It makes it very difficult for a guy like me to get out of here because number one, I'm built, stacked. Just joking. But yeah, I made it real. It was real tough. It took me about 3 minutes to get out of here. So I apologize for leaving you hanging like
you
that.
know what it looked like? It looked like an old man with a belly who's like leaned back in his recliner and has to make 2 or 3 swings forward to get his momentum going in the right direction so that he could get out of his chair. That's what it looked like at first. That's why I started laughing.
That's hilarious because that is exactly how I get up every single time. It has nothing to do with my big belly, but it has everything to do with the will to get up or the comfortability. Usually when I sit into a Papa Bear chair, I'm dialed in. Okay.
Yeah.
I know I only get in there because
Committed. You gotta commit.
I'm gonna stay there. Okay. If once I get in there, I'm not getting up unless I have to go pee. Nothing else is happening.
Right.
So that's kind of how it happens sometimes here. I lock in, but I should have brought both beers, but the one beer would just be sitting there getting not cold because it's really hot in here because it's hot today. Right. But it's been raining where you are. So
that foam wall behind you is very misleading. It looks like you have space, and I never noticed that you were right up on the wall like that. So that's kind of funny that you don't have the space that it looks like you have. But anyway, hey, let's hop into some Dynasty fantasy football talk. I know you're just like waiting to get in on that. That's definitely your field of expertise. So I'm gonna let you take the lead on this. Go ahead. What do you got for us?
Okay, so I was trying to post another post to some of my other guys. I forgot, so I needed a little bit more time, but that's fine. Okay. Listen, Dynasty fantasy football. A lot of people, they hear the term, they don't necessarily understand the term. Maybe, here's what Dynasty is. It's picking players in your fantasy football draft that you are going to be able to keep forever. Okay, so typically, Michael, typically every year when you do fantasy football, how is it for you?
I feel like without getting crazy in depth with it, I feel like I do fairly well. And a part of it is just like my fandom. My fandom helps me. I know that in years past, there's guys who really who really focus on I need to do all this research, and I need to buy this software, and I need to print out this list of top 250 fantasy players this year so that when one gets drafted, I can cross them off my list and all that. So I do all right. I wouldn't say I'm like super, super competitive. I win my buddy league sometimes, and I won my church league once. So,
okay,
whatever.
so let me explain to you how I do fantasy football. Okay,
here we go. Here we go.
I got about 9. I just started like a 9th league. 9. Okay, and in every one of these leagues, it's about anywhere from $50 to $200 a league. Okay, so I'm in 9. 9 leagues allows me the opportunity to be having exposure to a lot of people. So what I found out about fantasy football and why I didn't really enjoy it from the very beginning, because it's like I went up to draft. I had a draft, which was fun. Like, when I first started fantasy football, the most fun part about it was the draft. And I think most people can, concur on that statement. You invite some of your friends over, you pick your favorite players, and you try to win the league. And that's been like the most fun ever, going and having a draft with your friends and getting drunk and picking people. It almost makes you feel like you have your own team. So that was all fun. But then we get into the playing of the league, and, everybody's scoring is so different. And then you go and you have a great time. The league was great. And, boom, it was done. And then you had to wait until the next year. So what I started to do was I started to maximize my league entries, because I was like, hey, well, if the most fun part of doing fantasy football was drafting for me, then I was like, I'm going to draft like 5 or 6 times then. So I ended up getting into leagues. Well, what ended up happening is I realized that fantasy football makes NFL football more fun to watch. And an old timer, I call him an old timer because that's exactly what he is. Okay. He explained to me, and this is the only time I've ever heard anybody come at me with a logical thing. He explained to me that fantasy football destroyed the real game because it's like he doesn't want to root against his NFL team. And I understand that. Sure, I definitely get it. Every football team that you enjoy watching, you want them to win 500 points to 0. Okay? I get that. So my only way around it is, hey, baby, I just want my Christian McCaffrey to go for 22 points. And I still want the Seahawks to win by 14 or win by 3. But I need Christian McCaffrey to go for 22 points. I don't care how he gets it. He could be returning a fucking kick. He could, I don't care what it is. Listen, an 80-yard touchdown is so many points in fantasy football versus having the 7 points to the real game. So boom, if Seahawks want to score 21 and Panthers score 14, and on those 14, point touchdowns cumulative, Christian McCaffrey has 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, I'm all for that. Sign me up.
Hey, real quick, did I ever tell you about the time that I had Aaron Rodgers and Richard Rodgers, the tight end, in the game at the same time, and Aaron Rodgers threw that Hail Mary pass that went like 50 yards in the air? So I got the points, and it was a touchdown. So he catches it in the end zone, and it's a touchdown, and he gets I get the points for the 50-yard bomb, I get the points for the touchdown from both players, and then I get the yards. Yeah, the yards also. Yeah, it was just like, I think at that time it was like a 30-point swing, and I was like, this is the best year of fantasy ever.
Yes. And that's typically what I'm trying to say is it makes the game more fun. If you've got Aaron Rodgers or you've got Russell Wilson and the NFL team is down by 3 going into the 4th quarter, somehow you're probably going to be down by 3 or 4 points in your fantasy league. And so you're right there rooting the guy on, just like you're hoping that you win. And it makes everything fun. Now, what I don't recommend is, if you're going to get into fantasy football, why don't you get into fantasy football? A lot of people, I get it. Oh, I don't want to spend that much time on it. With the general knowledge, you could spend X amount of time on fantasy football and still be completely into it, 100% watching every game just like you already are, and not really take up any much more of your time. My whole thing is fantasy football is so much fun when you really dig into it, when you really have something, skin in the game per se. And I recommend putting yourself with skin in the game into your next fantasy league. If you guys put $20 on a fantasy league, please ask to triple the buy-in next time. 1, you might potentially win more money. 2, you probably have enough money to triple it up anyway. And 3, you can have a 3 times more fun time playing fantasy football and or watching fantasy football. So that's my recommendation number 1. My recommendation number 2 into having a better experience playing fantasy football. Okay. First of all, you already should be playing PPR, which means points per reception, which means every time anybody on the football field catches the ball, they get a point. Because that just makes sense. They did something well on an NFL football field. They caught the ball. They should be getting a point. It was only up until... Go ahead.
So explain for people who may or may not be new to fantasy football. So you have leagues, right? And so you mentioned PPR, points per reception. and then you have standard. Can you explain the difference between the two, just in case there's anyone that it just wants to know the difference?
Yeah, so right there, points, that is the difference. Points per reception is that, and standard is not. So
Okay,
standard is the
what do
way
you
that
get in
everybody
standard?
standard
Only
just rushing yards, touchdowns, receiving yards, touchdowns, throwing yards, touchdowns. That's it. So essentially in a standard league, you're touchdown hunting. That's you want to draft guys that get touchdowns. That's
so
it.
lower scoring games typically because you're not getting points per reception.
Well, no, you higher scoring games. You want a 56-point game every time, but you want every touchdown to go to one of your guys. And so that's fine. I mean, if that's what you want to start with, great. But the reason of going to points per reception is that you level the playing field. Because here's the thing, a running back's not going to get as much points per reception as a wide receiver. A wide receiver is going to get 10 extra points a game if they're good. Okay, 8. They're going to get 8 extra points a game. So they're going to get their yardage, their touchdowns, and then they're going to get about 8 extra points a game if they're a good receiver. And so that's great, but yet running backs catch the ball too. And so when you're actually trying to draft the running back position, you don't always have to go for the guy that gets touchdowns. Now you got a guy that doesn't score much touchdowns, but plays a lot on third down. And so you level the playing field between all positions. If you get a guy that is a high catch guy, low touchdown guy, I think it equals out getting that extra points a game versus that extra touchdown a game you'll get from another player.
A couple of years ago, I had James White, and you
or even last year, if you had James White, you were incredible.
Well, yeah, I know that. I believe I did have him last year. I've been pretty high on him the last few years, but I think 2 years ago I was looking at his stat line. It's like, oh, James White has, he doesn't really have that many yards. He maybe has like 46 yards, but he's caught the ball like 15 times today. And he gets a point every time he catches a ball, but he doesn't always go anywhere. He might get 1 yard, or he might be stopped for no gain or something like that. But he continues to get the points for the catch. And so, like, the stat line isn't always impressive, but the points that he scored at the end is always impressive because Tom Brady loves him. He always throws him the ball. So.
And there you go.
Right.
Tom Brady in a throwing system and throws to his running backs is just as valuable as, or would be marginally close. That doesn't make sense. Marginally close, but would be at least somewhat considerable in draft to a Zeke Elliott. Zeke, who doesn't predominantly catch very many balls, versus a guy like James White, who could have a great year. And so that's what I'm saying. Number 2, go to PPR. Okay. Number 3, most people are already in PPR leagues. So that's just kind of the standard way of playing. That's the most popular way. So, great. You're already in PPR. Now let's take that second step. Okay. Super flex. You ever heard of super flex?
Yeah, I've heard of Superflex.
Okay, so if you somewhat play fantasy football, or if you enjoy wanting to play in a deeper fashion, the very first move that everybody should be making is a switch to a Superflex league. Okay, Superflex meaning you can play a second quarterback on the field every week. Now, super flex. So why didn't I say 2 QB? Well, super flex means you don't always have to play a QB. You could play a wide receiver, a tight end, a running back. Also in that super flex position. But most of the time, the QBs are scoring the highest points. So most of the time, it's that. But draft strategies are what they are, and if you like certain people, you may end up with 2 or 3 quarterbacks that you like, but maybe 2 happen to be on a bye. And so it doesn't harm you for not doing QB, but it also just gives you more ability to go with someone else or someone different at the position. So I my dream goal is getting everybody that I know that plays fantasy football on a marginal or on a here I am with the marginal again.
Marginal.
On a base level. If you play fantasy football on a base level, every league that you should be going into this year needs to be super flex. Like, I need everybody to start playing 2 QB. And the reason why is, number one, there's too many good quarterbacks. Okay? And so if you're only saying that, you have 12 people in the league, okay, that now you only get to start 12 quarterbacks. Like, that doesn't take any skill. The top 12 QBs are all good. So it's like you just draft somebody and it's like, okay, well, I got him. You already know that it's good. You already know that maybe some weeks they'll do bad, but there's no skill into going into just drafting one of the top 12 quarterbacks. Generally, they're very close in production. They're probably going to give you about 15 fantasy points a week, no matter what. And so it takes away a lot more of the fun. If you could potentially play 2 quarterbacks a week, so now it changes who you draft in the first couple rounds. If you can draft 2 of the greatest, if you can draft 2 of the top 12 QBs in the first 3 rounds, then why wouldn't you?
Right.
But here you go. If you draft 2 of the top 12 QBs, then maybe I don't have to, and I can draft the number 1 wide receiver and the number 5 running back because you passed on number 5 running back to get your second quarterback. And so do you see how it now adds a bit of level of skill to what did I say was number 1? Okay? Or not number 1, but essentially having the draft be fun is really what we're trying to do here.
Right? So there's strategy involved in it. You're not just being like, oh, I like this guy, I like that guy. Last year was my first year playing with the super flex. I was in a league. I was actually in my buddy's family league. And I ended up being in his league because his brother was dating this girl and they broke up or whatever, and she was in the league, and then they had an empty spot. So he was like, dude, I need you to be in the family league to bring balance back to it, Thanos style. And so
Thanos, no. I don't think Thanos was. I mean, he was trying to bring balance, but also by killing out half of the world. So really, bringing balance.
That's what he was
Iron
saying.
Man.
That's what he was saying with his. We're not getting into that, but balance is what he was referring to.
I don't know if you could hear the ice cream truck. He comes down my street every now and then. And here's the thing. I have not heard an ice cream truck for a very long time. The very first thought in my head, just like the Pavlovian dog, was I almost just threw this whole entire table to the side to go get me some ice cream from the truck. Because the ice cream truck man driver is the greatest salesman in the world because he is creating a sense of urgency that is real. When you go into any store to buy something on sale, just understand that if it is a person-to-person sales environment, a car, a bed, you will be able to get that sale the very next day. Okay? But if the ice cream man drives by your house, you may never see him again. Okay?
You know what's crazy about ice cream trucks is like when the ice cream truck is rolling through your neighborhood, all the kids come running and even adults come running to it, right? And you get out there and it's like so much more than anything else. It's like, it's not a, hey, do you want to buy something off of my ice cream truck? The guy's like, no, he slides his window open and he sticks his greasy head out the van or the truck or whatever. And he's like, yeah,
Jeep, the old school.
Listen, he's like, what do you want? Cause I know you're here to buy ice cream. Which one would you like?
$5.50 for the damn Spider-Man one with the gumball nose.
Oh, is that your go-to or what?
Anything with a gumball nose was my go-to. Yeah,
Right.
Anything, because you couldn't find those anywhere. You could not go to the grocery store right now and buy a fucking kid's ice cream with a gumball nose. Okay,
Yeah,
they
I'm
don't
pretty
make them
sure.
anymore.
I'm pretty sure you're right about that. But what about that little like strawberry shortcake thing? You know what I'm talking
Yep,
about?
love those too. I
Yeah,
even
yeah.
get those till this day.
Yeah,
Those are my favorite.
you can buy those at the store, but they are really good. So,
They are good.
anyway, back to what we're supposed to be talking about. That ice
Okay,
cream truck
I
really got us
really
going.
think I really think that this podcast may be viewed in the near future by some other truckers that do know what they're doing in fantasy. So here's a little bar for you. If you tuned into this and you got all the way through this near the end and you've been waiting for this, then I salute you. Here is what it is. Dynasty fantasy football. Now, Michael, other side of the world here. You, my friend, would call yourself one of those said people who have never ventured, never dabbled, never set their balls on a block of ice before. You would say yourself you've never been in a dynasty league, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I don't know what the balls on the block of ice really means. It sounds like I'm about to be castrated, but hopefully that's not the case.
Hey, in true Game of Thrones fashion, anything can happen. Like be a terrible show.
Right.
Don't
Correct.
at me. Anyway, dynasty. Okay? If you think that you are above average in the idea of playing fantasy football, if you think you go to a draft with it's an 8 to 12 team league and over half of the players you draft with are fucking the dudes at work that you know do not watch football every week like you do, this is what you should be doing. You should be going online, or you should be the maniacal one that drives your friends to create a dynasty league. What is dynasty? Dynasty means, and I think I said this earlier, but dynasty means you get to keep them forever. You create a league that starts that may never end. Here's the thing, it has one of those infinity symbols. It is too present, is how you describe fantasy league. This
Wait,
dynasty fantasy league.
So you're saying I shouldn't pick Larry Fitzgerald because
Wrong. I'm
he's
saying that
retiring next year?
you shouldn't pick Larry Fitzgerald in the first round.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. But is Larry Fitzgerald draftable in a dynasty league at some point because his value? Yes. I'm not going to give you any of my secrets because maybe I'm drafting Larry Fitzgerald in the first round and I'm just ready to come and beat all you. Here's
Okay,
the thing.
Good luck with that.
Draft dynasty takes draft day to a whole new level. Okay. You're used to just drafting the guys you know, the guys you like. But if you are like me, you've been playing Madden your whole young life, where you've been,
Since 1995 with Eddie George on the cover.
Exactly. You know about draft classes coming up. You know you might watch the combine and get infatuated with DK Metcalf, who ran a 4.33 40 at 238 pounds. You start to fall in love with new rookies. Instead of having a typical redraft where you draft the same NFL every year, and this year you might get somebody different, next year, whatever. No, dynasty drafts, you draft to keep them forever. So when you draft Larry Fitzgerald in the first round, understand that there is now value, just like in a real NFL locker room. There's values to these picks. Your first pick in the first round, drafting Patrick Mahomes, might get you a number one quarterback that you do not have to worry about for the next 15 years, just like it does in the real NFL. Saquon Barkley, great running back, a number one running back for the next 10 years. If you draft Saquon Barkley early in the draft, you are doing well. He is young. He's a great talent. You're going to have him for the next 4 or 5 years. But guess what I did in my recent Dynasty League?
Drafted Saquon Barkley.
I traded Saquon Barkley for Dalvin Cook, Travis Kelce, a first-round draft pick this year, and a first-round draft pick next year.
All of that just for Saquon Barkley?
It's a Dynasty League, okay?
It still
Yes.
seems kind of steep.
Yeah, well, when you don't have a running back on the team that's younger than 30, then
Ooh.
yeah, because when are you going to get another one?
So,
Every year there's
so
hold
who
on,
did
every year there's draft running backs that get drafted that pan out zero. Bishop Sankey. Okay? Bishop Sankey. You might never see another running back on your dynasty team if you don't trade for him, because you might just fall into the draft class every single year, because this is what happens with dynasty. You draft rookies every year. Okay, so instead of drafting the whole NFL, you draft rookies. Well, you might have the fucking 8th pick every single year, and you might not get a good running back unless you know what you're doing. And so, yeah, Saquon Barkley may be worth an injured Dalvin Cook, an aging, also often injured Travis Kelce, and 2 first-round draft picks, which might be the 8th pick of the draft every year, which is basically what's left of the first top 6 guys every year. So it's a strategy, and it really is. It's amazing. It's an amazing strategy, because you just scoffed at that pick. Yet I'm the one that got Dalvin Cook, Travis Kelce, and I've thought that was a great trade by him, because I got an injured Dalvin Cook who was 1 injury away from never playing again, and Travis Kelce, who is old. He's like 30 years old, and how much longer can he be great?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily scoff at it. I guess I was just thinking like, oh, what do I really know about it? That seems kind of steep. But
You scoffed. You were Harry Scofter.
Okay. So my question is, what running back did he have on his team that made him say, "Oh, I absolutely have to do this trade now"?
Okay, that I was unprepared for that. Let me look though. Another thing about Dynasty is, here's the thing: you want to take it another step further. I'm crazy with Dynasty. Okay, I'm crazy, and the listener league that the Flex Network just created, which was me. Not only are we super flex, not only are we PPR, not only are we Dynasty, but we're also tight end premium. You ever heard of tight end premium?
Someone on the phone today told me about tight end premium.
That was me.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Tight end premium. Tight end premium. So here's the thing. When you say, okay, well, you added a thing called Superflex to make the quarterbacks more available, right? Because what happened in dynasty leagues or in fantasy leagues everywhere, people draft just whoever of the top 12 and they're good. And then the rest of the draft, they don't either get another quarterback until late or whatever. Well, everybody in the fantasy community going back a couple years or more, they realize, well, that's just what people are doing with tight ends. Okay. Tight ends are not also top 12 guys. You throw them in there, whatever. You get a guy that, you can throw in while your main guy's in his off, off game. And what do you do about that? So here's what you do. Tight end premium. Tight ends catch passes. Okay. Now, instead of a 1 point PPR, they get 1.5 per reception. So now every time they catch the ball 4 times, they get 5 points, or they get 6 points. They get 2 points extra for every 4 catches. Okay. So now if they catch the ball 8 times, which some tight ends have been known to do, they get an extra 4 points on top of the already 8. They're scoring 12 points already for catching 8 balls before they even get to the yards of the touchdowns. And so again, we're making this league dynamic. We're telling you There is not one position that you could draft in the first round and the second round that can be consistent because you want to get an edge on everybody else. You normally in super flex leagues, the first 2 rounds pretty much are dominated by quarterbacks. Now, when you're playing, potentially you can play 6 wide receivers every week.
Oh my
Potentially.
gosh.
That's crazy, right?
Right.
So, but if somebody drafts all wide receivers, then somebody else is going to get the tight ends, somebody else is going to get the running backs, and this is just how you make your league truly even. Who's good, who has the research, who's coming for the gold every single year. And it's going to be great. What on your mind? Sorry, I'm ranting about fantasy because I'm going to start my own fantasy side of this podcast. Not today, but in the future. So obviously you don't have to be a part of that because it's a little much. Like, you've never played Dynasty, and I'm here like, this is how I play. But what do you think is the best thing about what I just said, and maybe the worst thing about what I just said?
The only thing that I would say, so you said you could play 6 receivers. That just sounds scary to me because like I remember going, being at church a couple of years ago and then getting out of church and be like, man, because like for you, football games there can start at 10 a.m., but here they don't start until noon at 12. So like I get out of church and then like a game had just started like maybe 15 or 20 minutes ago. But there were times where I'd get out of church and like Mike Evans would already have like 30 points. And so like I'm like, "Yo, yeah, that's awesome." And then last year, the Bucks couldn't make up their mind about who they wanted to start at quarterback and if they were going to be hot or cold and all that stuff. So like Mike Evans' value like drastically dropped because of that. And so that was very frustrating. And so the idea of starting 6 receivers, I mean, it sounds good, but are you going to get all 6 of those guys to be going at the same time and like really playing well? Like what if 4 of those receivers have, between bad and decent games, like nothing special? Then you're like, man, I'm missing out on a lot of points here. So that's one of the things that scares me about that.
Well, it scares you because you do not know how to strategize right now. You've never played it. You don't know.
Right.
You don't have to start 6 receivers a week. There's 3 extra flex positions.
No,
So,
I understand that. I was just using that as an example that
yeah,
like,
that's a great example, as one that you would with your knowledge of football, your knowledge. You are basically saying that, Matt, your strategy or the strategy of a potential 6 receiver starting might not be the best. And you may be right. And this is exactly why fantasy drafting for dynasty football is amazing. Okay? Because you can start to make your own inferences. You can say, that doesn't sound good. What if I had 3 tight ends? It's tight end premium. What if I drafted all tight ends? Is somebody else going to do that? What about what you, and then you start to really think about it. And that's what's fun. That's what's awesome to enjoy. And I just wanted to give the listeners, as we end things here, I just wanted to give the listeners a real honest way to make fantasy football more fun for them. And I think if you, number one, go dynasty, okay, it will really change. If you're an average fantasy football player every year, but you think this is fun, I'm into this, what can I do? Dynasty, getting these guys forever. Now when you make trades, it's a legit, hey, I'm making this trade for somebody that I'm going to keep forever. It makes you feel like you're operating a true NFL team. And I think most people can really enjoy something like that. And I recommend it. The Flex Network recommends it. That's the end of what I got to say until another time about fantasy football.
yeah, I just the whole idea, just to finish up on my end about it, is like the draft is the best part. Like hanging out with your friends and like, hating on every pick that everyone makes just for the sake of it. I know a friend that's a big time Denver Broncos fan, and I think it was last year we were having our draft at a local pizza place, and he drafts Case Keenum like super early, and I am sitting right next to him, and I'm like, dude, you cannot be serious. Case Keenum is not good. He had one good year in Minnesota. You're gonna regret that. And he goes, no, dude. Case Keenum's going to be a top 12 quarterback in the league this year on the Broncos. He's going to kill it. I'm like, no, he's not. And then obviously I was right because Case Keenum is garbage. But it's just funny, man. It's like just the idea of like being with your friends and like hating on all their picks and telling them how dumb they are, or trying to do whatever you can do to persuade people not to pick a certain guy in a certain spot and all of that. And so, I generally have a lot of fun with the draft. And then I actually I'd went to a store and created my own trophy. Like I built my own trophy for my church league, and so that's pretty fun.
Oh yes.
So
spoiler alert. The Flex Network Listener League will have a trophy. Not this year. Building until the illustrious trophy is presented at the end of, or at basically the start of next year. I cannot wait for this. I cannot wait to see who wins it, because I'm a fanatic, but I think your friend Ray, who is supposed to be hopping in here, caught the cast, reminded him to hop in. He's in. We have 2 spots left, but those spots are pretty much filled up. I already got people in there. With more interest, I might open it up to a couple more spots. So who knows?
Maybe to 10 people. If the right people hit us up and say something, then
we'll
8. Push it to 10.
I'm a big fan of 8 people, just because when you're playing with people who are just starting out, 8 is a nice bundle where it doesn't matter the roster size that starts every week. You're all going to have decent players, and it makes it fun for everybody. Injuries then are the only things that really hurt teams. So, yes, we are the Flex Network. Michael, anything left to add?
I would just say, from an NFL perspective, be on the lookout for some pretty notable names to be hopping on some teams here, as we talked about all of that. But other than that, if you want to find us different places, we're on Facebook. You can find our Facebook page, Flex Network, and like I said, we're on Apple Podcasts, which is through iTunes. You could find us on there, Flex Network. Just look for the pink boom box that we have on there. We just got on Spotify, so find us there, and we're all over. But until next time, we will see you guys later.
Yeah.
This is the Flex Network. Flex on them. Flex on everybody. This right here is the Flex Network. Yeah. Flex on the G. Flex.